Imagine looking at a newborn baby for the first time in a crowded hospital room or a quiet home. Everyone is leaning in, searching for a familiar nose or a specific set of eyes. But behind the smiles, there is a mystery that has haunted our species for 300,000 years, a riddle that changed how we love, fight, and survive. Welcome to the First Why. Today, we are uncovering the greatest biological gamble in human history. How ancient men dealt with the fact that they could never truly be sure. For a mother, there is no doubt. Internal gestation and the physical act of birth provide a biological receipt that says, "This child is mine." She has 100% maternal certainty throughout the entire process. But for the father, the moment of fertilization is completely invisible and internal. This creates what scientists call the mammalian asymmetry. It is a fundamental rift between the sexes that dictated the rules of our evolution. Think about it from the perspective of an ancient ancestor living on the savanna. Resources like meat and protection were incredibly hard to come by. If a man spends 15 years hunting and fighting to keep a child alive, he is making a massive investment of his own survival. In the world of biology, this is a high-stakes trade-off. If that child carries his genes, his lineage continues into the future. But if the child belongs to someone else, he is essentially working the fields for another man's genetic legacy. This is the certainty gap. Because early humans didn't have DNA tests, paternity was a permanent question mark hanging over every birth. Evolutionary biologist Robert Trivers argued that this uncertainty changed male behavior. If a father's confidence is low, he is biologically less likely to provide resources. This isn't about being mean. It is a cold, hard calculation of survival that has been running in the background of our brains for eons. Our ancestors had to find a way to bridge this gap. If they didn't, social groups would collapse under the weight of suspicion and abandonment. They couldn't peek inside a womb or see the invisible spark of life. So they had to invent cultural and psychological tools to manufacture trust. They looked for patterns in faces. They created rituals around monogamy and social structures to keep men close to the fire. Some societies even decided that a child could have more than one father just to spread the risk and secure more resources. But before we get to those strange tribal survival hacks, we need to understand the social engineering happening right in your own living room. Have you ever noticed how the mother's side of the family is always the first to shout that the baby looks exactly like the dad? Is it because of biological fact? Or is it a calculated psychological move to ensure the father doesn't simply walk away and leave the family to fend for themselves in this world? This isn't just modern politeness. It's an ancient survival tactic, hardwired into our social behavior for thousands of years. If a father isn't convinced the child is his, he might not see much point in sharing his limited food or protection. To solve this, humans developed wild workarounds. Some cultures didn't just hope for one dad, they actively recruited a whole team. Take the Barí of Venezuela. They traditionally believed a child was formed by the accumulation of semen from multiple men over time. In their world, every time a woman had a different partner, that man's essence helped build the child growing inside her. This sounds like a myth, but it was a brilliant insurance policy. It created a system called Partible Paternity. One man might be the primary husband, while others were secondary fathers. All of them felt a biological responsibility to provide. The results were massive. Anthropologist Stephen Beckerman found that Barí children with multiple fathers had a 16% higher survival rate. By distributing the belief of paternity, a mother secured protection from several men, hedging against any one man's death. It's a shield against the ancient world's brutality. But our own bodies also tell a story of this deep uncertainty. This is rooted in the mammalian asymmetry. A mother always knows the child is hers, but the father is always guessing. In nature, testicle size usually reveals the mating system. Chimps have high competition, while gorillas have a strict harem system. Humans are evolved to be right in the middle. This suggests a history of flexible monogamy, where extra-pair mating was consistent. That's where the resemblance trap comes in. Have you ever noticed that newborns often look like a generic, anonymous potato? Scientists call this being phenotypically anonymous. Most babies don't actually look like their fathers specifically until they are much older. Yet, maternal relatives are much more likely to claim the baby is the father's twin. They will point to a nose. This is pure social engineering. By announcing the resemblance, the family reinforces the father's bond and his psychological duty to stay. It's a clever trick to bridge the certainty gap. If he believes he's looking at himself, he'll keep the resources flowing. Even the Trobriand Islanders used social rules to minimize biological paternity in favor of keeping political power in the mother's line. It was always about keeping the peace and the kids fed. For most of history, this was just a flexible arrangement. Our ancestors lived in a world where fatherhood was a community question solved by stories rather than genetic lab tests. But about 10,000 years ago, the rules of the game were completely rewritten. Humans stopped wandering and started claiming land. Suddenly, paternity wasn't just about who brought the meat home. It became about fences and who gets the inheritance when you die. This transition changed paternity from a social preference to a civilizational requirement that would shape the next 10 millennia of history. Once we owned property, legitimacy became the foundation of the economy. A man had to know he wasn't working the field for another man's genes. This need for certainty turned into cold, hard law. Ancient societies realized that if land was being passed down, there couldn't be any room for doubt. These codes controlled social behavior to ensure a father's legacy was legally and biologically secure across generations. This is where we see the rise of strict social controls. Things like seclusion and religious dogmas around virginity were essentially early biological security measures for inheritance. But laws weren't the only tool we used. Humans developed a fascinating psychological trick to keep fathers involved even when the law wasn't watching. Have you ever noticed how, at a baby shower, everyone swears the newborn has his father's eyes? Science suggests this isn't just a happy coincidence. Maternal relatives are far more likely to claim a child looks like the dad. It's a survival strategy designed to reassure the father and keep his resources coming. In reality, most babies are phenotypically anonymous. They look like a generic baby, so they aren't rejected by a father who doesn't see himself in them. Our own biology shows we've always been in the middle of this struggle. If you look at human testicle size compared to our primate cousins, we aren't built for total monogamy. We evolved for flexible monogamy. We lived in a world where extra-pair mating happened, but the goal was usually to keep a stable family unit together. For over 300,000 years, this was all just a massive guessing game played with laws, social pressure, and hopeful glances at a baby's nose. That all changed in 1984. Sir Alec Jeffreys developed DNA fingerprinting, and for the first time in human history, the mystery was solved for good. Suddenly, science could provide a yes or no that couldn't be argued with by anyone. But the results were more surprising than we expected. You've probably heard that up to 30% of men are raising children that aren't theirs. Those high numbers usually come from disputed paternity clinics where fathers already suspect a problem. When we look at large-scale genetic studies over 500 years of family trees, the real number is much lower. It turns out the cuckoldry rate has stayed at roughly 1%. Even without modern technology, our ancestors' social systems were incredibly effective at keeping families together. We spent millennia building a world on a question we could never answer. We now realize paternity was never just about biological links. It was about the stories we told and the communities we built to protect our children. From the first hunter-gatherers sharing the role of fatherhood to the modern lab test, our journey has always been about one thing: making sure the next generation survives. If you found this hidden history of our species fascinating, hit that subscribe button. Join us at the first why as we keep uncovering the secrets of why we are the way we are. Don't forget to like this video and tell us in the comments, do you think modern technology has changed how we view family? See you in the next one.